trust in you have better plans I haven't even dreamt of yet. I know that you are for me when everything's against me. I have put all my hope in you. Jesus, I will trust you. I will trust you. I know you never fail. I will trust you. Jesus, I will. Jesus, I will. I don't know how the story ends, but I know that you finished it. I'll close my eyes and just let go and fall into my only hope. There's safety in the falling when I surrender fully. I put all my hope in you. Jesus, I will trust you. I will trust you. I know you never fail. I will trust you. Jesus, I will. I will. Jesus, I will. I will. The only thing I know is God, you're in control. In every little detail, you are close. I'll never be alone. Here in the unknown, the power of your presence fills my soul. Now everything I know is God, you're in control. In every little detail, you are close. I'll never be alone. Here in the unknown, the power of your presence fills my soul. Jesus, I will trust you. I will trust you. I know you never fail. I will trust you. Jesus, I will trust you. I will trust you. I know you never fail. I will trust you. Jesus, I will. I will. Jesus, I will. I will. Jesus, I will trust you. I will trust you. I know you never fail. I will trust you. Jesus, I will.
Good morning and welcome to Online Worship at St. Peter's. Thank you for joining us today, and if it's your first time here, we want to extend a very special welcome to you. This morning we'd like to give you a free gift. St. Peter's has access to a huge video library of faith-based videos called Right Now Media. We'd like to give you free access to those videos that you can view whenever and wherever you want, on your phone, tablet, computer, or even your smart TV. This library includes content for all ages and all stages of life. There are video resources to help you with parenting, marriage, discipleship, and more. To get access, you can visit the link below in the video description, or you can use your smartphone and scan the QR code on the screen. This morning, we continue to make our way through our Bible Gems to Remember book. We encourage you to follow along with us, and if you still don't have this Bible, you can always send an email to stpkids@stpetersedina.org to request a free copy. Today, we'll be reading about the story of Isaac and Rebekah. Abraham wanted to find his son Isaac a wife. He asked a servant to go out and told him that God would help him find someone. The servant prayed to the Lord to guide him in his search, and the Lord answered. To find out more, you can read the story starting on page 50 of your illustrated Bible. We also want to invite you to follow St. Peter's on social media. You can stay up to date and receive biblical inspiration on Facebook and Instagram. You can check out all of our previous messages, as well as songs on our YouTube channel. And you can even follow us on Spotify to listen to music that we're singing each week in our in-person worship service. Thank you again for joining us today. Now let's jump into our service with our kids' message.
Stories of the Bible. Sarah laughs. This is Sarah. Sarah was Abraham's wife. One day, as Abraham sat near the entrance of his tent, God appeared to him. Abraham looked up and 3 men stood before him. God promised Abraham that he and Sarah would someday have a son. In fact, God promised Abraham that he would have many children. Even more than the stars in the sky. Now, Sarah was very old when God made this promise. When she heard that God promised to give her a child, she laughed. The messenger of God stopped Sarah. He asked, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" Sarah chose to trust God, and she became pregnant and she gave birth to a son. The son's name was Isaac. God's promises came true for Abraham and Sarah. Abraham became the father of many nations, and from his child came children, and from their children, more children, until Abraham's descendants were truly more numerous than the stars in the sky. Abraham and Sarah trusted God for the promise and believed that God was faithful.
Don't you love a happy ending? We're all wired that way. Last year during the pandemic, as I started watching videos of my messages, I noticed that I tend to smile all the time. Even when I'm sharing something serious, I seem to be smiling. Maybe I'm a glass half full kind of guy. Maybe I anticipate the happy ending that's coming. Or perhaps following God's plan of salvation, God's great rescue has given me such confidence that in the end, everything works out all right, that I'm enjoying the journey. Please don't get me wrong. I know life isn't always easy. There are difficult moments, tough decisions to make. A lot of pain and heartbreak, yeah, all that for sure. But when we take a step back, when we examine the whole timeline, when we get a 10,000-foot overview, we can't but see the happy ending. The faithfulness, the hand of God and His guidance in our lives. Take the example of Isaac, who we meet in the book of Genesis. Isaac was the long-awaited son of old parents who had been promised not just a child, but descendants as many as the stars. That was when they were in their mid-70s. And now, approaching 100 years of age, the dreaming of having children seemed a little inconceivable. For a quarter century, they'd trusted God. Abram had listened to God's promise. He packed up the family and left his people. Still nothing. Have you ever felt that God has forgotten you? That Maybe you offended the Lord and now he isn't going to come through on your behalf, that you don't deserve it. Well, you don't. You aren't worthy. You shouldn't receive anything good from a holy God, and neither should I, nor Abraham. But we have a generous God who blesses us far beyond what we deserve. So here's Abraham, making a new life where God told him to go, unsure of the future, but still holding out hope that God will still deliver on his promises. Do you think he was smiling at this point? I doubt it. I'm sure all hope had been drained out. But God continues to turn his hopelessness around. Remember when God took Abram outside his tent and showed him the stars in the sky, promising that his descendants would outnumber all that he could count? That was in Genesis chapter 15. Well, before that, God first used dust to show him that he was good and would make good on what he had promised. The Lord said to Abram, after Lot had parted from him, "Look around from where you are, to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you." So Abram went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents. There he built an altar to the Lord. If you're in charge of dusting in your home, you know how plentiful dust is. Some days it seems to take over. Remove it one day, and it only takes a couple of hours for its cousins and nieces and nephews of the first family of dust to settle in and into their new home. And God isn't just talking about the dust on your desk or on your TV. Look to the north and to the south and to the east and to the west. That's a lot of dust. Then later, God repeats the promise again. But before that, there's a lot of trusting going on. Abram's wife gave up on God's plan and offered her servant to her husband so that maybe he could have a child through her. She thought that maybe God needed her help. Sarai said, "Perhaps I can build a family through her." And that turns ugly. Women despising one another, jealousy, mistreatment. God didn't forget either of those two women, though. The slave woman, Hagar, when she ran away pregnant, was met by an angel. She said of the Lord, "You are the God who sees me," and said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." In the midst of all of that drama, when Abram is now 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and establishes a blood covenant with him. Let's read in Genesis 17. Abram fell face down, and God said to him, "As for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you, for the generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. The whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God." God even changes Sarai's name as well. God said to Abraham, "As for Sarai, your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of people will come from her." But even Abraham tries to tell God how to fulfill his plan. Then God said, "But your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him." And then, are you still following? When God's messengers pay a visit to the tents of Abraham, he and his wife still aren't convinced. And the stress and the hopelessness and the delay seems to drag on and on. They are absolutely miserable in the midst of all of this. But in the meantime, Abraham's nephew Lot, that he brought with him when he set out to live as God had invited him, Lot ended up being caught up in a huge mess. Talk about Sin City. Notice how much grief will come from family members for generations to follow. That's why it's hard to live in the present moment. We need that happy ending to know it's coming. Abraham still didn't fully trust God. He got in the way. But even when we do that, it doesn't stop God from accomplishing his purposes. Abraham and Sarah had forgotten that when God says something, it's as good as done. And sure enough, 9 months later, just as God had promised, Sarah gave birth to a baby boy. They named him Isaac, which means son of laughter. And Sarah laughed. But this time it was a glorious, happy laugh. Her dream had come true. Finally, hope is restored and faith grows. So we read on. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. While his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. Sarah credits God for fulfilling his promise. And even Abraham gets in on the praise, later recognizing that the Lord will provide. It's at that point that God discloses yet another visual so that Abraham doesn't forget. I will surely bless you, God said, and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. And as the sand on the seashore, grains of sand, so many. God comes through always. And the Lord will provide the visual that you need at just the right time to keep you going until his prepared happy ending for you. No matter where you are on your way to a happy ending, and here's why. There's indeed a happy ending on the way for you by faith. And one day, God would send another baby, a baby promised to a girl who didn't even have a husband. But this baby would bring laughter to the whole world. This baby would be everyone's dream come true. This baby is Jesus. And Jesus opens the happy ending for you and for all who trust God's promises by faith. He delivers us from hopelessness, from sin, from sickness of every kind, and opens an eternal happy ending to our story. You see, in the midst of the story of life comes today's Bible gem. The Lord will guide you. The family line of Abraham and Sarah would include their great-great-great-grandchild, Jesus. But for that to happen, before he died, Abraham wanted to make sure that his family line would be continued. His son Isaac needed a wife. And as transplanted people, it was important that she would come from one of Abraham's relatives. So the wait for the happy ending continues, a wait that took place beside a well with a prayer. From our illustrated Bible, when Isaac was all grown up, Abraham called his most trusted servant. My son needs a wife, Abraham said. I want you to find one for him. Abraham told his servant, don't let Isaac marry a woman who lives in Canaan. The people here don't know God, and they don't follow God's ways. Go back to the country I came from. One of my relatives there can be Isaac's wife. God will help you find the right woman. The servant loaded 10 camels with jewelry and fancy clothes. Traveling far, the servant and his men reached the town of Nahor. They stopped at the well outside of town. The camels kneeled down to rest. When the servant prayed, Lord, this is where the young woman will come for water, or the young woman come for water. Please guide me to the one who will make a good wife for Isaac. I'll ask each young woman for a drink. If one of them gives water to me and to the camels, I'll know she's the one. As the servant was praying, a beautiful young woman came to the well. Her name was Rebekah. and she carried a jar on her shoulder. The servant asked her for a drink. "Yes, of course," she said. She poured some water and then gave some to the camels. The servant was excited. He gave Rebekah some jewelry and asked her about her family. She told him who her father and grandfather were. Rebekah was one of Abraham's relatives. Bowing to worship God, the servant said, "Thank you, Lord. You answered my prayer even before I finished praying." Do you trust that God will guide you, that He will answer your prayer even before you finish praying it? I want that kind of faith. And you? Isaac and Rebekah were married, and they loved each other. In time, they had children, twin baby boys. And God promised the same thing to Isaac that He had promised Abraham. God would give the land of Canaan to Abraham's family, make them into a great nation, and bless the whole world through him. And what a happy ending that is for all of us. Our biblical blessing comes from Psalm 143. "Let the morning bring me word of your unfailing love. For I have put my trust in you. Show me the way I should go. For to you I entrust my life." The Lord will guide you. May His blessing rest upon you as you await your happy ending.